Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the filthy, slippery, and entirely unglamorous world of medieval thievery. Not the swashbuckling, rooftop running kind. No cloaks, no cunning heists, no rooftop vistas under a perfect moon. Just mud up your knees, scabs on your elbows, and a knife in your boot that isn't sharp enough to matter. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy wallowing in the worst-case scenarios of historical existence. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now dim the lights, put something rough and itchy over your shoulders, and settle in. Because tonight, you're not a rogue. You're a child with dirty fingers, hungry eyes, and no one waiting for you to come home. And you won't last. You're born in a corner of the world that smells like boiled onions and urine. The year is 1300 and something. You don't know, no one tells you, and it wouldn't help if they did. Time's not marked by calendars here. It's measured in missing teeth and how many rats are under the floorboards. You come into the world screaming, not because you're alive, but because your mother dropped you into a wooden washtub while drunk. It's not warm. It's not clean. It's not even empty. There's still soap scum and a dead spider clinging to the edge. She pulls you out by the arm, curses, slaps you once to shut you up, and wraps you in a tunic sleeve she tore off a dead peddler 2 winters ago. That's the first day. And honestly, it doesn't get much better. You're raised, or more accurately, tolerated, in a one-room hovel stacked against a crooked lane, pressed between the tanner's yard and a midden heap that hasn't been cleared since St. Swithin's Day. The roof leaks in 3 places, the door doesn't latch, and the walls sweat in summer and weep in winter. Inside, it smells of sour ale, wet wool, and your mother's teeth, of which she has exactly 4. No one sings to you. No one checks on you when you sleep. You don't even have a name. Not really. Your mother calls you oi or that thing. Once she called you bastard, but she was actually shouting at the cat. Still, it sticks. By the age of 3, you've learned to avoid her feet when she's angry and to chew the corners of hard bread until they don't draw blood. There's no cradle. You sleep in a basket that used to carry onions. No one washes it. No one washes you. Your skin is a battlefield of scabs, flea bites, and mud that never comes off entirely. Your hair mats into clumps. Your nails blacken. You learn to scratch with a stick because using your fingers draws blood. No one asks about your father. Not even you. Fathers are for people who have things like windows or meat. Your world is with smoke, shouting, and hunger. Your friends are rats. Your comfort is warmth, any warmth. Bread crust tucked in a sleeve, a dead dog's belly, a brick left in the sun. When the wind howls through the alley, you cry. Not because you're scared, because you know it'll knock the lice into your ears again. The first thing you ever steal is time. You run when your mother calls, and you don't come back for half a day. She doesn't look. She doesn't ask. You sit under a cart and suck your thumb until your skin goes white and wrinkled. You think about eating a worm. You do. It tastes like the floor. You never tell anyone. No one talks about dreams where you are. What's the point? The baker's boy who once said he wanted to be a knight got kicked to death by a drunk mason last Lent. He had soft hands. You don't trust soft hands. By 5, your favorite game is what's edible. You play it daily. Moss? Yes. Candle wax? Depends. Bits of fish spine left in the gutter after market? Always yes. You've had food poisonings more times than you can count. You don't count anyway. You don't know how. You learn early that coughing gets you slapped, that crying gets you kicked, and that silence gets you nothing. But it doesn't hurt. Silence becomes a habit, then a shield, then a prison. People walk past you. You learn to see without looking, to beg without asking, to move like smoke. No one teaches you. It's just how you live. Because the truth is, you were never a child. You were a stomach with fingers. You were born to be a thief. There are no laws in the alley where you live. Or rather, there are. but they aren't written in ink or spoken in court. They're enforced in bruises, shouted through teeth, and carved in a bone. By the time you can walk without falling over, you already know them better than the Psalms. Rule 1. What's not nailed down can be taken. Rule 2. Nails can be pulled. Rule 3. If you get caught, make them regret it. Rule 4. Run faster than the slowest boy. Rule 5. No one helps you. Not even your friends, especially not them. By now you live more in the street than in the hovel. The hovel is cold. The street is colder, but at least it doesn't smell like your mother's vomit. You haunt the gutters, the drainage trenches, the wooden steps of the alehouse where drunks drop coins and forget they did. Your world is sharp edges and soft targets. A turnip here, a crust there, a purse string dangling too far from a merchant's belt. You're not alone. The lane is full of children like you, limping, coughing, rat-eyed, and bone-thin. You don't know their real names. They don't know yours. You go by sounds. Click, skid, bite. Little John, who isn't little, and Rat Boy, who probably doesn't even like rats. You form packs, not by choice, but by survival. You eat more when you run together. You bleed less when someone else is slower. Your first fight isn't fair. None of them are. You try to take a half-gnawed apple from a pile near the butcher's trough. Another boy sees it first. You're smaller. You're faster. But he's been hungrier for longer. He gets a rock. You get a tooth knocked loose. It doesn't grow back. He gets the apple. You get a scar you'll pick it for the next 3 years. It scabs into your identity. You learn pain in layers. The stinging kind when you fall on cobblestones. The deep kind where your fingers get stepped on. The ugly kind when a shopkeeper catches you, pins your arm, and twists until you hear something pop. He doesn't report you. Reporting takes time. He just throws you into a barrel and pisses on the lid. You stay there until night. You chew the edge until your gums bleed. You never go back to that street again. Clothes don't fit. That's normal. You are what you can find: a monk's discarded robe, a shirt stolen off a fence, boots with no soles, laces made from butcher's twine. Everything smells. Everything leaks. Everything chafes. You don't take them off because you can't. You'd have nothing left. You patch them with sinew. You reinforce with wax. You sleep in them. You bleed into them. You become them. One day a man drops a copper. Who doesn't notice? You do. You pick it up, hands shaking. You expect a slap, a shout, the sudden heat of panic. But no one sees. No one stops you. You walk away with it pressed so tight in your palm it leaves a mark. That night you buy food. Real food. Not scraps. Not moldy rind of pie. Meat inside, hot. You eat it so fast you burn your tongue. You don't care. The next day you try again. You get caught. The constable is bored. He's old, fat, slow. But he has a stick, and he knows how to use it. He doesn't ask your name. He doesn't care. He brings you to the square, where a priest pretends to be disappointed, and the bailiff doesn't even look up from his dice. They give you 5 lashes, public. You scream on the first, cry on the second, go silent by the third. By the 5th, you pass out. You wake up in a puddle behind the apothecary's wall. Someone, maybe Rat Boy, maybe not, left a crust beside you. You eat it. You bleed on it. Then you eat the rest. The next time you don't get caught. You start to learn how to move like smoke, how to grab without looking, how to smile like you belong, how to vanish. You're not just surviving now. You're adapting. The city is still trying to kill you. But now you're starting to listen to its rhythm. And if you're lucky, if you're fast and hard and quiet, maybe it'll start to ignore you. And that, in this world, is the closest thing to mercy you'll ever get. It isn't glamorous. It isn't clever. It isn't even planned. Your first real theft, the one that matters, is a moment of accident wearing the costume of opportunity. You're 8 years old, shivering behind a tallow stand near Cheapside, ribs like broom handles under a stolen tunic, watching a pilgrim haggle with a linen vendor. You don't know what you're looking for, but you're hungry, and hunger sharpens every sense. The pilgrim laughs, throws back his hood, digs into a pouch, and something glinting and heavy drops. No one sees it, except you. It rolls under the edge of the stall. One silver coin. Not a copper. Not a broken halfpenny. Silver. Enough to eat for 3 days. Maybe more. Your breath catches. Your fingers move before your mind does. It's not graceful. You scramble, knock over a crate, bark your shin, and still get in your hand, cold. Real. Yours. And then you run. Not because someone's chasing. Not yet. But because your body knows what's coming. You dash down Fish Street Hill, through the piss stream behind the Coopers, slide beneath the carcass rack at the tanner's yard, and land in a pile of soft, wet, wrong-smelling hides. You stay there until your lungs stop shaking. When you finally look at the coin again, it's coated in grime and blood from your own scraped knuckles. It shines anyway, and you feel something bloom in your chest. Not pride. Not joy. Something worse. Possibility. You don't tell anyone. Not the other boys. Not your mother, if she's even sober that night. You spin it one bite at a time. A meat pie, still steaming. A cup of small beer without backwash. A half wheel of cheese wrapped in leaves. A crusty heel of black bread so dense it could kill a bird. You don't eat all of it. You hoard some. You hide crumbs under a loose board near the dyer's yard and sit beside them like a dragon with treasure. You feel rich. You feel powerful. You feel full. And for a whole day, you don't steal a thing. That's a mistake. Because the world notices when you pause. The rats move in. The other boys sniff you out. One, older, maybe 12 with a scar down his lip, catches you licking cheese from your fingers. He asks where you got it. You say nothing. He hits you anyway. And when he's done, he takes the rest of the cheese, kicks your shin, and tells the others you're soft now. That you've gone fancy. That you're eating like a monk and pissing like a girl. The others laugh. And you understand deep in your ribs that stealing is only the first act. The second is hiding. The third is surviving what comes next. The next theft is on purpose. It's a baker's assistant with a loose belt pouch and poor spatial awareness. You watch him for half an hour. You count his steps. You know when he scratches, when he adjusts his apron, when he looks left to flirt with the milk girl. That's when you move. It's smoother this time. Clean, quiet. He doesn't even flinch. You pocket the coin and vanish. You eat that night. No one notices. And it begins. Soon it's not about food. It's about control. Not much. Just a flicker. A little warmth in your chest when your hand closes around a prize. A little spark when the world keeps turning and you're richer for it. The baker doesn't miss the coin. The merchant doesn't miss the ribbon. The priest doesn't miss the seal. But you do. You count each thing. You touch them in the dark, whispering their names like a prayer. Button, bone comb, glass bead, copper ring, silver nail. Then you get cocky. You try the wrong mark. A clerk, narrow-shouldered and nervous, but quick, too quick. He feels the tug. He grabs your wrist and screams. The crowd turns on you like a school of eels. A butcher shouts thief. A cooper swings a barrel stave. You duck, bolt, tumble, and make it 3 streets before someone catches you by the collar and slams you face first into a doorframe. They drag you to the chapel yard. Not the jail. You're not important enough for that. Just public shame. Just a message. They tie your hands. The constable reads a line from parchment he clearly can't understand. Something about wickedness and correction. Then they lash you 5 times across the back. Not hard. Not soft. Just enough to welt. Just enough to sting for days. Just enough to leave a line you'll scratch until it scars. And when they let you go, bleeding, spitting, dizzy with sun and pain, no one offers you food. No one asks your name. You wander the alleyways like a kicked dog. You sleep beneath a ladder. You piss blood. But the next day you're back. Not because you're brave, because you're already nothing. And thieving, for all its pain, makes you feel like something. You begin to learn the craft. How to brush past without being noticed. How to move in a crowd without creating ripples. How to disappear. It's not magic. It's muscle memory. It's breath control. It's patience. You watch the masters, the old pickpockets with bent fingers and broken noses. You learn from their shrugs, their leans, the way they cough when it's time to move. You mimic. You adapt. You survive. And then, one morning, in the drizzle behind the fishmonger's stall, an older thief, nameless, one-eyed, smelling of salt and beer, tosses you a strip of oilcloth. Inside, a rusted blade the size of your thumb. For the ropes, he says, and the rest. You nod. You don't ask what the rest means. You already know. You don't remember the last time she called your name. Maybe she never did. Maybe you were always just boy or thing, or get me more beer. She had a voice like wet rope and a face like old bark, twisted and cracked by wind, by bad ale, by whatever lived in her lungs, and coughed its way out each morning with phlegm the color of spoiled mustard. She wasn't cruel in the way stories make mothers cruel. She didn't lock you in cupboards or beat you with iron rods. She was simply indifferent, profoundly, fundamentally uninterested in the fact that you existed. You were an obligation she resented, an accident she tolerated out of habit. Until one day, she didn't. She vanished between one morning and the next. You woke up curled under the rafter plank with a lice-nibble blanket pulled to your chin and the smell of sour wine still hanging in the air. But she was gone. No note, no mess, no blood. Just gone. A pewter cup on the table, still half full. Her boots missing. Her belt knife, the one with the bone handle, left behind. You checked under the table, behind the ale barrels, outside by the piss corner. Nothing. You waited a day, then another. Bye. The third day, the landlord kicked you out, said he wasn't feeding rats. You didn't argue. You weren't even sure you knew how to argue. You moved into the street like a shadow slipping off the edge of a candle. No ceremony, no grief. You didn't cry. You didn't mourn. You felt nothing. Not because you were strong, but because the idea of loss only matters if something once belonged to you. And your mother? She was never yours. Not really. She was a fixture like the hole in the roof or the mildew on the walls. You missed the belt knife more than her. At least that was useful. You tried to find her. For a while, asked the whores in the alley. Asked the alewives. Asked the toothless beggar near the abbey gate who claimed to know every soul in the parish. Old Tooth, they said, could be in the river, might have gone north. Probably in a ditch. You stopped asking. Not because you found her, because you realized she wasn't coming back. And more importantly, that no one cared. She disappeared, and the world didn't blink. So you followed her example. You became the kind of thing that disappears. You stopped sleeping in places with roofs. Roofs drew attention. So did corners. So did fires. You learned to curl under stairs, in sidecarts, between piles of refuse that smelled bad enough no one would bother checking them. You didn't steal big anymore. Big made noise. Big got you noticed. You learned to take just enough, a crust, a button, a loop of twine. You never stayed in one spot more than 2 nights. You never returned to the same mark. You ate in motion. You walked in loops. You picked up the habit of talking to yourself in a whisper, not out of madness, but to keep track of your thoughts. Your hands got quicker. Your face got longer. You learned to hold yourself in a way that made people look away. Not hunched, not suspicious, just forgettable. You watched how others moved, learned to mimic the shuffle of drunks, the bounce of choir boys, the aimless wandering of fools. You became anyone, no one, everyone. You stopped smiling. You stopped talking. You spoke only when asked, and even then, only lies. You started sleeping with your back against cold stone, your knife under your thigh. You chewed on rags soaked in vinegar to stave off the sickness that took boys your age every winter. You kept your sores covered. You picked lice off your own scalp. You cut your fingernails with broken glass. You wiped your ass with moss. And when you caught fever, you rolled into the ditch by the south wall and prayed to whatever god still bothered to listen to rats. You survived. No one noticed. You began to forget what your voice sounded like. You forgot your mother's face. You forgot your own name. The boys in the alleys called you Scratch, or Rat, or Latch Boy. You answered to anything. You were hungry more often than not. You were cold every night, but you had mastered the one skill that made all the others possible. You could vanish. And in a world where thieves were hanged, where beggars were whipped, where orphans were sold for half a loaf and a candle stub, vanishing wasn't failure. It was evolution. By the time you're 12 years old, you've stopped counting days and started counting wrists. Not yours. There's the ones you watch as they carry baskets, hold purses, pick over fish heads in a market, lean out of cart windows to shout at their drivers. Wrists mean coin. Coin means bread. Bread means one more day without gut rot or sleeping with rats in your mouth. You don't hunt for money. You hunt for motion. You watch how cloth sags, how fingers curl, how people forget that they're carrying the thing you want. Every man is a lock. Every woman a window. Most of them are open, wide open, and far too stupid to know it. You don't pity them. You envy them a little, maybe, but pity is for clerics and poets. You work, and thieving now is no longer chaos. It's labor. It's skill. It's craft. Your hands are quick now. You've trained them like dogs. You've practiced with buttons, cords, chunks of rotten would you pretend are coins, all while blindfolded behind a tavern. You can slide a copper from a cut purse belt faster than he can pick his nose. You've cut more strings than a tailor and tied more slip knots than a fisherman. You've learned to pinch the hem of a tunic and tell if it hides a purse or a lie. Your fingers are always moving, always twitching. They crave the feel of linen, leather, sweat-slick coin, the scratch of wool over something weighty. And when they're not stealing, they're restless, wrapping twine, peeling bark, tapping against your ribs as if reminding your bones that you still exist. You don't work alone. No one does forever. Roan is still around, though you start to suspect he's more danger than he's worth. He talks too much, smiles too fast, makes up stories that are too big for the alleys they live in. But his grin is useful, and people like him. You let him talk while your hands work. He distracts. You disappear. Tooth has gotten bigger, meaner. Lost a toe to frost last winter and acts like it makes him some kind of profit. Finn vanished after someone saw him. Creeping near the bishop's house, and the bishop's dog didn't bark. You assume he's dead, or rich, or both. You miss him a little, which surprises you. Then it stops surprising you, and you move on. The work, when it's good, feels holy, not like church holy, not with incense and saints, holy like breath, like fire. You move through the crowd and feel untouchable. You steal without being noticed. You vanish before the weight shifts. There's a kind of power in it, not real power, not swords and seals, but enough to let you walk straighter, eat better, sleep with a knife on your chest instead of under it. You take just enough, never too much. The city doesn't notice a missing koi, notices a missing hand. But some days go wrong. Some days a purse string snaps loud. Some days a whore sees you too clearly. Some days the mark turns, grabs, roars, and suddenly everyone's watching the boy with the pinched face and hungry fingers. You run fast. Your knees hit barrels. Your shoulders clip door frames. Your feet bleed. You scale gutters, squeeze between carts, dive headfirst into butcher troughs. One time, you hide under a pile of dead pigs. Another time, you jump into the Thames. That day, you nearly drown, but you keep the ring you stole, and that feels like a win. The guards know your face now. They don't know your name. Not yet, but they know your gait. One has a crooked eye. One has a limp. One calls you boy who runs. You don't speak to them. You don't beg. You've seen what happens when you do. Pleading is weakness. Weakness is noise. Noise brings sticks, or worse. You've seen boys lose ears, fingers, a foot. One lost a jaw to a priest's mule after being caught sneaking bread from the chapel pantry. You remember the scream, not because it was loud, but because it stopped too fast, like someone had turned off a lantern with a hammer. So you plan, you learn to map the crowd, you memorize the stalls, you know which vendors turn which way, which streets echo with boots, which corners smell like gar breath. You time your cuts with bells. You disappear when the steeple chimes. You always check the sky. Rain makes people hurry. Haste makes blindness. Rainy days are feasting days. You start to hoard. You find a hole in the wall behind the tanner's lot and make it yours. You line it with rags. Stuff it with things no one would miss. Broken combs, frayed thread, a scrap of ribbon, 2 copper buttons, a dead spider you decided was lucky. Your treasures, your trophies. The world doesn't give you anything, so you take it in slivers and stack them like bricks in the cathedral of your survival. You start talking to them sometimes. Not because you're mad, because they listen better than Roan, better than Tooth, better than anyone. And then, one day, you make a mistake. It's small, a twitch, a glance over your shoulder before you turn the corner. You were carrying too much. You were thinking too hard. You were tired. You didn't check the crowd well enough. The man wasn't a merchant. He was a guard in plain clothes. And he was fast. He didn't shout. He lunged. He caught your arm like a hawk catches a rabbit. Not with anger, but with finality. You went limp. That saved you. They dragged you to the square again. This time it wasn't lashes. This time it was stocks. Your wrists locked in rough wood. Your head exposed. The sun made your scalp burn. The crowd jeered. Someone threw a fish head. Someone else threw dung. You kept your eyes down. You counted breaths. 142 before the first stone hit. You bled from your cheek. Someone called you rat spawn. You didn't react. That night it rained. No one unchained you. Your knees buckled. You pissed yourself. You cried. Quietly, just once. At dawn, the bailiff unlocked the stocks with a yawn, said nothing, walked away. You stood up, you stumbled, you walked. You didn't look back, you didn't go home. You had none, you didn't cry again. But something had changed. Now you were not just a thief. Now you were a marked thief. And in a city like this, marks don't fade. They deepen. There are places in the city you start to avoid, not because you're afraid, but because they remember you. A cart vendor with a lazy eye once saw you pull a purse on Candlemas and hasn't forgotten the shape of your ears. A butcher's wife remembers how you slipped past her pig cart and took a coin from a dead man's boot. The money wasn't even hers, but she screamed like you'd stolen her name. So you walk different streets. You loop in half circles. You take alleys that twist like entrails and leave you coughing up soot from cellar chimneys. London is not a city you walk through. It's a beast you crawl inside, and if you're lucky, it doesn't chew, but it always swallows. And lately, it's been digesting you. You're eating less now. Not because there's less to steal, but because more people are desperate. The winter's been long. Grain wagons come late, if they come at all. The fish stink before they hit the tables. Even the rich smell worse. You can hear coughing from behind manor gates. Not the soft sort, the kind that scrapes the chest raw and leaves blood on the walls. That sort of cough makes people disappear. One week, it's a boy from Paternoster Row. Next week, it's a guard captain's daughter. Then it's 3 vendors from the North Wall. Some say it's punishment for gluttony. Others say it's rats. You say nothing. You watch. You learn. You stay outside. That's the rule now. Never go inside unless you have to. Never breathe air that's been exhaled by someone with coin. The rich die first, then the bakers, then the ones who clean up after both. Your world starts shrinking. The streets feel longer. The crowds feel thinner. Every door is shut. Every face wears a mask of fear, but you can't afford fear. Fear is for people who have the time to count days. You live hour to hour. And every hour the city gets hungrier. You stop working the market. Too visible. Too loud. Too many eyes. You move to docks and slaughterhouses. You steal fish scales and copper nails. Anything that glints. You sneak into the dye pits and rob the apprentices blind while they're pissing behind sheds. You learn to spot the boys sent to fetch firewood with purses tied like bait to their belts. You cut them, run, dive into the nearest cart, and vanish beneath fish guts or sackcloth or barrels that still smell of vinegar. One day you crawl into a broken cask and find a corpse. He doesn't scream. That's how you know he's real. You start dreaming of rope. Not rope as tool. Rope as sentence. Rope is the last sound a boy like you ever hears. You've seen it twice now. Once in the square behind the pillory. Once on the hill near the gallows tree, where they string up petty thieves on Mondays to remind everyone that property is sacred. You remember the way the second boy pissed himself. You remember how long it took him to stop moving. You remember that the birds came before the bailiff left. You don't tell anyone about the dreams. You don't tell anyone anything anymore. Roan's gone now. Disappeared into the night after boasting too loud about lifting a silk purse off a priest. Maybe he did it. Maybe he didn't. Either way, no one's seen him since. Tooth says he saw someone like Roan hanging outside the north wall with a bag over his head and a Bible stuffed in his mouth. You don't ask questions. You just nod, and you start working alone. You begin to change. You don't notice it all at once. But the mirror tells you when you catch your reflection in puddles or polished metal. Your eyes are harder. Your jaw's crooked from a fight you barely remember. You walk like your bones ache. You eat like you're hiding the food from someone even when you're alone. You started talking to things that don't talk back. Your blade, your boots, a coin with a hole in it that you swear once whispered to you in the dark. You've started to collect. Scars like medals. One on your forearm from a stable boy's pitchfork. One across your back from slipping on slate while escaping across a roof. One behind your ear from a guard's ringed hand. You name them sometimes, not out loud, but you remember them, like friends that left you behind. You've learned to sleep with your boots on. You've learned how to make a bed out of 3 bricks and a rag. You've learned how to kill a rat with a sharpened spoon and eat half of it without gagging. You know which fountains to drink from and which ones taste like dead men. You've memorized which guards patrol with purpose and which ones look the other way if your hands move fast and you drop the right coin in the mud. And yet, for all of that, the hardest lesson is this. You are not real to these people. You are a shape, a shadow, a figure on the edge of their vision when their purse goes light or their chicken disappears. You are a rumor passed between vendors. You are a footnote in a guard's curse. You are not a person. You are a warning. Don't dawdle. Don't talk to urchins. Don't trust the boy who walks too quietly. And maybe that's your greatest talent now. Not the hands, not the speed, not even the fearlessness. You have learned how to disappear so completely, you sometimes wonder if you were ever here to begin with. But you're here. You know it. The city knows it. And one day, it's going to try to take what's left of you. You don't remember when it stopped being about survival and became something else. Maybe it was the night you cut a man's purse not because you needed the coin, but because you wanted to see if you still could. Maybe it was the morning you realized you hadn't spoken to another person in 3 days. And when you finally did, your voice came out like a stranger's. Maybe it was the time you watched another thief get cornered in the alley behind ST. Mary's, and instead of helping, you stayed still, crouched like an animal, breath held, heart silent. Not because you were afraid, but because you wanted to see how it would end. And it ended badly. It always does. The man screamed until his teeth hit stone, and by then, the guards had him. You didn't look away. You watched not like a child learning, but like someone checking the score of a game they no longer believe in. Because that's what it's become now, a game. And you? You're good at it, better than good. You know the angles, the timing, the thousand little rhythms of city that never stops punishing the ones who move too slow. You know how long it takes a drunk noble to fumble with his belt. You know when the fishmonger turns her head to gossip. You know which corners echo, which cobbles are loose, which guards are slow from wine or grief or boredom. You've mapped the city in fear and instinct, but the city has noticed. The first sign is the bait. A boy in a too clean cloak with a pouch tied too loose, standing alone near Fish Street Hill. You spot it instantly. You walk the long way around, pretend to scratch your leg, never break stride. He sees you, smiles. You keep walking. That night, you hear two boys got caught. One screamed for his mother. The other tried to bite the constable and lost a tooth. You don't feel satisfaction. You feel something colder. A shift in the current. A ripple in the rot. The second sign is the new guard. Not fat. Not lazy. Silent. Watches more than he speaks. You see him near the goldsmith's corner, then again at Poultry Lane. Once he follows you 3 turns without blinking. You lose him only by ducking under a tannery arch and crawling through waste so thick it stains your knees black. You don't see him again for a week. Then you find a boy dead behind the priory wall, coin pouch untouched. You recognize the way his arms are folded. Not like someone sleeping, like someone arranged. The third sign is the whisper. A rumor that someone's taking thieves, not for punishment, but for payment. A man in a long coat, pale hands, clean nails, doesn't work for the city, doesn't work for the church, just pays coin for names. Names of boys, names of hands, names like yours. You hear your own name once. Not your real one, but the name the guards shout, Latch. A woman selling carrots mutters it to a priest. A week later, her stall burns. You didn't do it, but you understand the message. So the game changes. You stop working daylight. You move at dawn, at dusk, between bells. You steal food now, not coin. You avoid market crowds and focus on what's forgotten. Clotheslines, cellar doors, the gaps between kitchens and ash pits. You become more ghost than boy. You speak only in clicks and gestures to the few left who still know your face. Most of them are gone. Some to rope, some to rats, some to fire. You sleep in the graveyard now, not in the tombs, too obvious. You curl under broken stones, cover yourself with rags, pretend to be mourning if someone passes. It works mostly. The dead don't talk, but they don't betray either. One night, you wake to find a real mourner weeping beside you, a woman. Hair like chalk dust, skin like ash. She never looks at you, just whispers names into the dirt and leaves a turnip. You eat it. You leave the root. She never comes back. You start carving things, not art. Symbols, a line for every week without being caught. A circle for every mark that didn't see you. A cross for every time you thought you wouldn't get away. You scratch them into wood, stone, bone, anything that holds. They pile up. You don't count them. You just feel them. They become your church, your litany, your record of sins that only you believe were holy. One morning, you find blood on your boots. Not yours. You don't remember the night before. The sky was gray. The street was empty. You were cold, but not enough to dull your senses. And now there's blood, dried, dark, clotted around the sole. You check your knife, clean. You check your palms, bruised but whole. You don't ask questions. You burn the boots. You walk barefoot for 3 days. You start seeing things. A man with no face in the crowd. A child with a crow on her shoulder who follows you for 2 alleys then vanishes. A voice in the market that says your name like it was written in salt. You stop eating meat. You start whispering into drains. You keep salt in your pocket, just in case. Just in case what? You don't know. But the city's shifting, and you've shifted with it. You were a thief. Now you're something else. You don't steal for hunger. You steal to remind yourself you still can. And every time you do, you feel the city watching, not with anger, not with mercy, but with hunger, like a dog watching its own tail twitch, waiting to bite. You no longer run, not because you've grown bold, but because you've grown quiet. Not cautious, not clever. Quiet, there's a difference. You walk like shadow walks, lean like smoke leans, slip like rot slips between wood grain. You don't leave prints anymore. You don't leave breath. You've learned to shift your weight like water. Your feet make no noise, not because they're skilled, but because the city has learned you, and the city allows it. You walk through it like a blade through cloth. And that should scare you, but it doesn't. Not anymore. Your name is gone. You don't even remember what your mother used to call you. She's a blur now. Not a person, just a shape with breath and smell and the sting of slap. Roan is gone. Tooth is gone. Finn is a ghost you talk to when you've gone too long without words. You make new names for yourself when you have to speak. Tam, Hob, Jory, Locke. None of them fit. None of them stay. You are no one. You are everyone. That's the trick. But being no one has a cost. You used to have a face. It smiled. It flinched. It twitched when you lied. Now it's stiff, set, weathered like the statue of a man who once mattered. Your hands are cracked. Your nails dark with ash and lie. Your ribs show when you stretch. You've started losing teeth. One came out while you were gnawing on old bread. Another you pulled with a coin and a prayer. You swallowed it, just to feel it pass through. You start hearing stories about yourself again, but they're not whispered anymore. They're shouted at taverns, in market corners, in sermons. The smoke boy, they call you, the scarf ghost, Latch, the one who takes food from beneath pillows, the one who cut a noble's throat in his sleep, the one who robbed a priest of his sandals, his crozier, and his patience. None of it is true. Most of it, anyway. But that's the curse of legend. It grows bigger than the body it was born in. And one day, it devours the source. So you shift again. You stop stealing in daylight. You stop stealing from people. You turn to things. Markets leave behind rot. Homes throw out bones. Rats leave trails that lead to grain if you follow their rhythm. You become vermin, not an insult, but an evolution. The rat lives. The rat adapts. The rat never stands still long enough to be skinned. You spend your nights in chimneys, rooftops, and once inside a coffin. The undertaker found you asleep next to a corpse and just closed the lid again. You slept better that night than you had in weeks. It smelled like wax and lavender. The dead at least didn't betray. One day, a child follows you. Not a thief, not a beggar, a girl. Maybe 6, maybe 8, covered in soot. Eyes like cracked ice. She says nothing, just walks behind you. All day, you double back. You climb walls. You vanish. She follows. At night, you corner her, demand to know who sent her. She says nothing, just stares. You leave her a piece of hard bread and vanish again. She doesn't follow the next day, but the day after, you find the bread, untouched, molded, marked with a single scratch, a line, carved slow, deep, like someone was teaching you to count backwards. You don't eat again for 3 days. The city changes in spring, not cleaner, just faster. The plague quiets. The nobles creep out again. Guards march with more confidence. The hangings return on schedule, and with them, the crowds, the noise, the heat. It would be the perfect time to return to your old craft, to slip, cut, vanish, but something in you hesitates. Not fear, not guilt, something worse, disinterest. You begin to feel untethered from hunger. You start stealing things with no value. A pewter spoon, a bishop's shoe, the feather from a jester's hat, a child's doll missing one arm. You stash them, not for coin, not for trade, for memory, for weight. You tell yourself you're collecting, but it feels more like mourning. like laying stones on a grave no one else will visit. One night, you climb the Tower of Street. Elwick's, not to rob it, just to see how far you can be from the ground without floating away. The wind hits you like a sermon. Cold, sharp, final. You laugh. A dry sound. You spit over the side. You watch the drop. You wonder what the city would say if you let go. But you don't. Because you're not done. Because there is still breath in your body and fire in your fingers. And because the city has not yet won. You stop counting days. You start counting things that don't change. The chill in your left knee that started after that rooftop slip last winter. The way your boots always squeak on cobblestones if you step just so. The rhythm of the night bells from Southgate. Always 3 heartbeats too slow. These become your time. Your calendar. The stars above the baker's square that flicker only when the air turns dry. The cats that mewl in corners no one sweeps. The drip from the pipe near the dyers. Alley that never quite freezes, even in the coldest weeks. You have stopped being a boy. You have become part of the architecture. And yet, even stone crumbles when the frost runs deep enough. The job, if you can still call it that, comes from a boy younger than you. Barely 10, face too clean, hair combed, clothes stitched. He looks like someone's page, someone's son, someone who doesn't know yet how the world grinds bones into flour. But he knows your name, not the real one. The wrong one, Latch, he says, whispering like it's a prayer and a curse at once. He offers a coin, not silver, but fat and yellow, French, too bright for this city, and says 3 words, Eastgate. Midnight. You follow because it's something, not promise, not payment. Something. You walk slow. You loop. You vanish between carts, behind wagons, under stairs. You move like fog and think like hunger. The East Gate is quiet, but not empty. 2 guards, not drunk, not asleep. That's a bad sign. You wait. Then you see the boy again. He's pointing, not at you, at a carriage, velvet trimmed, already creaking away, leaving behind a figure, tall, cloaked, limping, carrying something wrapped in linen. You don't recognize him, but he recognizes you. And that's worse. You run before you think. You run not because you're chased, but because you know this wasn't a job. This was an invitation, an opening, a crack in the door, and behind it, something you don't want to name. You hide in the tannery because nothing that smells human comes looking in that pit. You curl up beside a vat and shiver through the stench. Your hands shake, not from cold, from memory. The man's eyes, not angry, not surprised, pleased, like a butcher pleased to see a lamb wander home. You start dreaming again, but not of rope. Now it's keys, dozens of them, rusted silver, carved from bone. You dream you're swallowing them one by one. They rattle in your throat. You wake gagging, mouth dry, fingernails dug into your neck like you try to reach down and pull them out. You don't sleep the next night. You try to work again. You cut a purse. You lift a knife. You steal a ring from a dead drunk's hand. But your heart isn't in it. The city feels wrong, like it's listening, like it's waiting. The boy returns on the 5th night. This time he says nothing. Just hand you a pouch. You open it. Inside, a tooth. Human, clean, wrapped in silk. You drop it. It bounces. You run. By now, you know this isn't about coin. This isn't about survival. This is about you. Someone wants your name. Not the one you made. The one you forgot. Someone's been digging under walls, under skin, under rot. You find Finn's old bolt hole beneath the chapel. No one's been here in years. The rats have taken most of it. But you wall yourself in. You eat what you find, mold, insects, old crumbs that taste of dust and wax. You don't light a candle. You don't make sound. You sit with the dark and let it press on your lungs. But the dark isn't empty. You start hearing things again. Not voices. Your own. Things you never said aloud. Things you buried. The way you whispered to yourself the day your mother vanished. The The chant you used to keep from crying when the lashes hit. The names of the boys who never came back. All of it floats up now. In the dark, in the silence. In a hollow behind your ribs where your breath once lived. And then, one night, you laugh. Because it's funny. Because this is what it costs. To vanish so well that even you can't find yourself again. To become smoke, and then wonder why no one sees you anymore. You climb out of the crypt the next morning. Your knees crack. Your eyes sting. But the sun is real. And the city? Still here. Still alive. Still cruel. You walk. Not to work. Not to steal. Just to walk. And the guards look at you and see no one. And the vendors see a shadow. And the boy with the tooth. He's gone. But the silk it was wrapped in, that you kept, because it was soft, because it was clean, because it smelled like a memory you never had. And you don't know what that means. But for the first time in weeks, you want to. You're not dead, but you've stopped being alive in any way that matters. There's still breath in your lungs and blood in your body, but none of it belongs to you anymore. You move because you must. You eat because something inside you gnaws until it hurts. You sleep like a beast does, shallow, twitching, with one eye cracked open for movement. And when the city wakes, you do not wake with it. You rise like something the rats uncovered, drag yourself toward noise and scent, and pretend for a few hours that you are a boy with a spine and a name. You become so thin that your shadow looks like a lie. And still, no one notices. That's the trick. Once upon a time, they saw you. A constable might glance your way. A merchant might curse. A washerwoman might shield her purse. But now, nothing. You've become invisible not by skill, but by erosion. You have no edges left. Nothing solid to grip. The thieves in the alleys don't nod to you anymore. You're not one of them. The world of cut purses and blackjacks, stolen bolts of cloth and pocketed trinkets. That's still a world, still a system, still human. You've slipped below it. You no longer steal to live. You haunt. You scavenge. You drift through the rot that spills from butcher shops and the sickle-shaped scraps left behind. After the bakers scrape the ovens, you move through London like spoiled milk through cloth, leaving nothing behind but stench. Your fingers, once quick, now shake. You've begun to drop things, not out of carelessness, but because your grip doesn't hold the way it used to. The skin on your palms cracks. Your nails blacken. One night, you find your thumb bleeding without knowing why. You wrap it in the only thing you have, a strip torn from your own tunic, stiff with grease and sweat, and you do not cry. You haven't cried in weeks. Not because you're brave. Because tears require water, and your body can't spare it. You tried once to rejoin the rhythm. Not to be whole again, you know better, but just to remember what it was like to be among people. You went to St. Lawrence's Market and pretended to browse. Watched a boy about your age filch a cluster of shriveled grapes and vanish like fog into the spice crowd. For a moment, your hand itched, your breath caught. You remembered the pressure of risk. You stepped forward, reaching for a purse tied loose at a wool seller's hip. But your feet betrayed you. You stumbled. Your heel caught on the cobble. And the woman turned, not fast, not startled, just tired. She looked down at you the way a miller looks at a rat caught in the flour bin. Not afraid. Not angry. Just resigned. And you realized in that moment, you weren't even worth shouting for. That was the last time you tried to steal from someone with a face. You sleep now in the same two places, a drain tunnel behind the tanner's yard, thick with rot, but warm if the wind's right, and a wooden storage bin behind a chapel, where the rats are aggressive but predictable. You've named one of them. Not out of affection, out of repetition. You call him Father Elric. He took your bread once and bit your finger. You respect him. He at least still has teeth. One morning, a child offers you a crust. You flinch, not from fear, from confusion. No one offers you anything anymore. You take it, not with gratitude, with caution. You sniff it. It's stale, hard enough to break a tooth, but you eat it slowly while the child watches. She doesn't speak. You think she might be mute. She just watches, then nods once like she's judged your existence acceptable, and leaves. That night, you dream of your mother, not the real one, the version your brain made later when you needed someone to blame for the quiet. She doesn't hit you in the dream. She just turns away. That's worse. You wake up choking. You don't know why. You wipe your face and realize your own spit is thick with blood. Your teeth are starting to loosen. You feel one at the back with your tongue. It shifts. Not much, just enough to let you know your body has begun abandoning pieces of itself. You find a mirror the next day, a broken shard in the mud behind a cobbler's shop. You clean it with your sleeve. It's warped and the silvering is cracked, but it shows you enough. Your cheeks are hollow. Your eyes don't blink the same way. You try to smile. You forget how. The skin just pulls, awkward and dry. Your lips have split. You didn't notice. You're not ugly. You're unfinished. The guilds don't want you. The other thieves don't speak to you. The beggars spit when you pass. You've become something in between. Not feared, not pitted, just ignored. You could die on the steps of the alderman's hall, and no one would even nudge you aside. And you tell yourself this is good. This is freedom. This is what you wanted. But you know the truth. You didn't want to vanish. You wanted to escape without disappearing. You go to the bridge one night. Not for the view, for the air, for the space. You stand there, fingers curled around stone, watching the river roll black and thick beneath you. You don't think of jumping. You think of what would happen if you did. If anyone would care, if the guards would fish you out. If your corpse would be blamed for something it didn't do. If the boy who gave you the crust would remember your shape. You don't jump. You walk back to the tunnel, and you sleep beside the rat. Because that, at least, is something solid. Something still alive. You don't think about the word career. That's for clerks and candle makers. But looking back, you can tell there was a progression. Once you stole bread, then purses, then names. Now you steal from places, structures, institutions. You've become a parasite on the walls of London itself. And that means risk. Bigger coins, sure, but heavier locks, higher ledges, thicker doors, and people inside who don't scream when they catch you. They just swing. You start hitting workshops, storehouses, chapels. Not for silver chalices or holy relics. Those are for organized men, with fences and scribes and muscle. You're not that. You go for what's there, nails, tools, bolts of linen, a crate of spoiled apples you can sell to vinegar brewers. You steal to survive, not to thrive. You are not building anything. You are staying out of the ground. That's enough. The houses you enter now are not grand. They're dense. Timber walls, iron hinges, thatched roofs when you're lucky, tile ones when you're not. They creak, shift, betray you. You learn to step on beams, not slats. You learn to breathe through your teeth. You learn what dog snores sound like through a wall, and how to guess which floorboards groan worse just by the shape of the ceiling. You carry no light. If you can't see, neither can they. You navigate by smell, by texture, by memory. There are places in the city where your fingers know the way better than your eyes. Places where the edge of shutter means 3 paces to a window, where the smell of boiled cabbage tells you you're near the Chandler storehouse. You become a kind of shadow, cartographer, mapping darkness through pain and trial. Your body learns what your mind cannot describe. You try not to kill, not out of mercy, out of economy. Blood is loud. Corpses bring patrols. Panic makes people change routines. You don't want that. You want the world to stay still while you pass through it like a fever, noticed only after you're gone, and never quite clearly. But that resolve weakens when you break into a cellar on Friday Street and find not salted meat or cider barrels, but a man, awake, drunk, angry. He lunges with a cleaver. You dodge. Mostly, his blade cuts your arm. Open, shoulder to elbow, and your hand reacts before your brain does. Your blade finds his throat. Not deep, not instantly fatal, but enough to send him to the floor gargling and clawing at your boots. You run. You bleed. You sleep in a ditch outside the city for 2 days because you're afraid he saw your face. He didn't. He died too fast. But the fear lingers. The shaking. The guilt? No, not guilt. Just dread. Of being seen. Of becoming part of the story. You wrap your arm and will torn from a curtain you stole 3 winters ago. You boil it when you can. You chew roots to stave off rot. The wound festers anyway, turns yellow, then red, then white again. You keep moving. The fever passes, or maybe it just learns to live inside you. There are fewer friends now. Roan's gone. Last you heard, he tried to rob a spice merchant from Milan and ended up nailed to the west gate as a warning. Finn's probably dead. No one said it, but no one's seen him in 2 winters, and he wasn't the type to disappear by choice. Tooth survived, moved up, joined the gangs near ST. Giles, he has a fence, a crew, even a girl, a washer with a lazy eye and fast fingers. You see him sometimes. He pretends not to see you. You don't blame him. You've become the thing even thieves don't want to acknowledge. There are whispers now, not about you, about the boy, the thief, the one with the limp, the one who walked through the night like smoke, the one who took from the Chancellor's cousin and vanished. That boy, that myth he still talked about. Respected, feared, but you know better. That boy's dead. What's left is you, scarred, slow, still climbing, but not higher. Just away. Always away. You raid a manor once. Just once. Desperation, not ambition. You climb the wall like it's made of knives. The guards are asleep or drunk. The dog's been fed poppy husks. You get inside. You find a storeroom. You take silver, real silver, bowls, a plate, a comb with teeth like razors. You fill your sack. You leave. Almost. Almost. A girl sees you. 8, maybe 9. Hair like flax, eyes too big. She stares. You stare. Neither of you move. Then she says it, not a scream, a whisper, but a clear one. Thief. That's all. Just the truth. You bolt. No one follows. Not then. But the fear follows you for days, weeks. The feeling of being known, of being someone's story now, of being real. You ditch the silver. All of it. Drop it into the river with a prayer to saints you don't believe in. You steal apples that night. Safer. You sleep in the rafters of an abandoned tannery, soaked in pigeon shit and the scent of old leather, and try not to think about the girl, about her eyes, about the way she didn't scream, about what it means when a child sees you and doesn't even flinch. You avoid manors after that, but the city tightens anyway. The guards patrol more often. The priests preach louder. The beggars become meaner. Winter comes with teeth this year. Hard frost. Deep hunger. You chew bark once, it doesn't help. You catch a rat and try to roast it over a candle. It smells like burning rope. You eat it anyway. You dream of warmth. Of the baker's oven on Cheapside. Of the stables at the Red Lion where the straw steamed in the cold. Of Marla. You wait cold. Always. By now, you're less a thief than habit. Not a man. A twitch in the city's nervous system. You move when it moves. You hide when it yawns. You no longer think about days, seasons, or saints. You measure time in bruises, in scraps, in hours where no one tries to kill you. Your world is as wide as the streets you can still run, and as narrow as the gutters you can still squeeze into. You've grown thinner. Not with hunger, that's old news, but with use. You're wearing through like a boot sole, and the stone beneath you is getting closer. Winter turns cruel, not sharp, dull, damp, the kind that softens your bones and rots your thoughts. You sleep in a collapsed bakehouse where the chimney leans like a dying soldier. It lets in enough wind to remind you you're still breathing, but not enough to freeze your spit to your face. You sleep curled like a beetle, arms tucked, knees drawn in. You wake with your joints locked and your teeth aching from clenching through dreams you never remember. There's less to steal now. Not because people are watchful, but because they're just as poor as you. The city starves in layers. The nobles grumble. The craftsmen scrape. The beggars snap at each other like dogs in a drained well. You once stole half a turnip from a child with a limp. He chased you 2 streets and bit your arm. You let him keep the rest. You didn't care about the turnip. You just needed the motion. Your body forgets how to sit still. You shake sometimes, not from cold, not from fever, from stillness. When nothing moves, you feel your blood remembering the cobblestones. You hear footsteps that aren't there. You smell rain that hasn't come. Your nerves are wired to streets, to tension, to fight or flight. Usually flight. Always flight. You still climb. Not because there's treasure above. You learn better. But because the ground feels like a question you don't want to answer. You scale things no one bothers to name. The side of the fishmonger's guild house. The frame of the old gallows, half taken by ivy. A bell tower with no bell. You sit there sometimes, not for the view. What view? Smoke, fog, rooftops like broken teeth. But for the silence. The cold wind reminds you that your skin is still yours. And that no one knows you're up here. Except once. A face in the window. Not a soldier. Not a merchant. Just a girl. Maybe 12, pale. Watching. You freeze. She doesn't scream. She doesn't move. Just watches. After a moment, she closes the shutters. Not with fear. With finality. Like someone pulling a book closed on a story they don't want to finish. You don't go back to that tower. You hear about a job, not work. There is no work, but something new. A shipment of grain in the guild hall's back room. Poorly guarded. A few sacks gone missing wouldn't even be counted. You say yes before you hear the rest. It doesn't matter. Food is food. Even spoiled, it's trade. Even weevils have weight. You go with 3 others. You don't know their names. One limps worse than you. One chews a stick constantly. The third says nothing but whistles under his breath. You hate him. You hate them all, but need binds. Hunger glues, and plans, however foolish, make you feel human again. You slip in through a broken panel near the floor. Your smallest still. It's your curse and your currency. The sacks are there. Heavy, molded, perfect. You get 2 down before the door slams open. Guards. Not many. Just 2. One old. One sleepy, but armed. You don't think. You kick the candle. Darkness falls like a knife. You hear shouts, footsteps, grain spills. A fist hits your side. You crawl. You crawl like a rat chased by fire. Outside, you split. You hear the whistler cry out. You hear steel ring. You don't turn. You never turn. You run until your lungs burn like lime and water. You run until your knees beg for mercy. You run until the city forgets you were there. You keep 1 sack. You sell half to a brewer for 6 copper. The rest you try to eat. It's foul, sour, infested. You chew anyway. You try not to think about the stick chewer, about the whistle, about the guards, about the blood. You fail. You get sick. Not death sick. Not yet, but close. Your stomach rebels. Your head swims. You sweat even when the wind slices your skin. You shiver and burn and forget where you are. You spend 3 days curled in an alley behind the apothecary's shop. He steps over you twice. Never says a word. He knows better. You're not a patient. You're the tax of the city. When you can stand again, your sack is gone. Of course it is. You weren't guarding it. You were guarding nothing. Not even yourself. You don't cry. You don't curse. You just walk. You step into a street you've never walked before. You look up. You see nothing familiar. You keep walking. The buildings don't look real. The people don't sound real. You drift like smoke through a world you no longer understand. You beg once, just once, a whisper, bread. The woman flinches, not at your voice, at your face. You catch your reflection in the glass of a butcher's shop. You do not recognize it. Your eyes are too wide, your lips too pale. Your skin hangs like it's thinking about letting go. You raise a hand to your cheek and feel the bones press back. You laugh. It doesn't sound human. That night, you sleep under the stairs of the City Watch barracks. No one checks. No one thinks to. You dream of grain, of rats, of smoke, of rooftops with no sky. And when you wake, the snow has started again. You return to the market not because it's safe, but because it's predictable. The market is pain you understand. It breathes with a rhythm, sharp and foul and full of elbows. You slip back into its bowels like you never left. The smell welcomes you. Piss, roasted nuts, old fish, worse breath. The cries are the same. Onions, pigs, figs, sins. You listen. You don't hear your name, but you hear types, whispers, warnings. There's boys again. They say, the quick fingers, the rats in boots, the ones that smile before they bite. And someone always answers, let them try. That's the trap. The market invites and devours. You're not fast anymore. Not truly. Hunger has slowed your joints and the winter damp has begun to claim your knees. But you're still clever, still invisible. You drift like something half-seen, a stain, a flutter, a draft. You don't take purses anymore. Too loud. Too risky. You go for goods now. Things no one will miss until dark. Eggs, buttons, cabbages. You don't eat cabbage, but you know who buys it. You move between stalls like mold between teeth. Always growing. Always unwelcome. The boys are back too. Not your boys. Not roan or tooth or fin. New boys. Sharper, angrier, hungrier. They don't know you. They don't fear you. They think you're old. You're 20. Maybe time slips. You might be younger. You might be older. What's certain is this. You move differently. And they see it. One of them watches you too long near the tanner's stall. Another bumps you, testing weight, balance, how soft your side feels. You keep moving. You don't challenge them. You're not teaching. Anyone today, you're surviving. Let them think you're done. Let them forget. You sleep beneath the stalls when you must, between canvas and frost. The rats are company, not threat. You've bitten one once. It didn't help, but it made you laugh, and that was rare. You trade now. Not with coin, with memory. You know the old fishwife likes trinkets. You give her a bent brooch. She gives you 2 herrings and a promise not to scream next time. You give the baker's boy the prayer scratched into wax, and he lets you warm your hands over the ash bin. It's not friendship. It's economy, the only one that matters. You get caught once. Not bad. Just a wrist, a twist, a shout. A man selling eels grabs you by instinct, and you freeze for half a breath too long. He bellows, thief. That word again, it echoes, it spreads, like rot, like fire. You run. The market parts around you like a mouth full of broken teeth. Children scatter. Women curse. You leap a barrel, duck beneath a rope, skid on blood. Pigs or mans, who can say? You make it to the tannery, to the back, to the place where the hides hang and the air smells like flayed gods. You don't hide. You become still. You are part of the wall. You are part of the stench. The eel man doesn't follow. You wait until dusk. You steal a pail of offal on your way out. Not for food, for barter. You give it to the dog behind the almoner's hall. She watches you now. Doesn't bark. You call her sister. You don't know why. Once, you almost kill someone. Not on purpose. A child. Maybe 6. You were trying to take an apple from the cart. She darted under your elbow. You elbowed her head, and she went down like wet cloth. You ran, of course, but you came back. Not right away. Later. You asked around. You gave up 2 buttons and a whole egg to a hunchback for news. She's fine, he said. Bruised, scared. Her mom thinks it was a ghost. You nodded. You didn't smile. You weren't relieved. You were reminded. That's worse. The church bells toll for plague again. Not in the market yet. South of the river. But the whispers are already here. It's the breath, they say. It's in the mist. You hold yours more often now. You move faster past coughs. You sleep farther from the warmth of others. You've buried 3 friends already. Names? Doesn't matter. One had red hair. One owed you 6 copper. One tried to kiss you once. You didn't stop him. You didn't answer either. You try to remember your mother's face. You fail. You remember the way she held a knife. Not the blade. The grip, like a promise. You try to remember the first thing you stole. You remember the sound. Coin on stone. A sound that meant fate. You were already falling. You try to remember your name. Not scratch. Not boy. Not thief. Your name. You fail. You stop trying. You speak less now. Not from fear. From futility. Words take effort. Effort takes heat. You are conserving. One night, you find a man trying to hang himself behind the sausage stall. You don't stop him. You just watch. You think, will the rope hold? It does. You take his boots when he stops kicking. They're better than yours. Less piss. More heel. You don't feel shame. You feel gratitude. He would have wanted them used. You tell yourself this. You eat better for a week. You don't smile. You start noticing things you shouldn't. The way guards glance toward the bakers before raids. The way the stall beside the furrier hides a gutter grate. The smell of lye just before an execution. You file these things away. You don't use them. You just collect, like teeth, like debts. You find a boy one night, half-starved, shaking under the bridge where the thieves used to meet. He says his name is Rook. You nod. You don't ask questions. You give him half a crust. He follows you. You don't stop him. He talks. You don't listen. But one night you give him your coat. Not out of mercy, out of memory. He says thank you. You don't answer. The next day he's gone. You find your coat on a corpse in the river 2 weeks later. You take it back. No one steals from you. Not anymore. You're not sure when the streets stopped speaking to you. It wasn't sudden. No thunderclap. No scream. Just a slow quieting like the world growing tired of your footsteps. The corners that once whispered, the gutters that once gave, the cracks in the stone that once felt like open hands. They all turn away now. You move like a ghost through a city that has begun to forget you were ever alive. It's not death. It's subtraction, a gentle erasure. And it starts with silence. The market is louder than ever, but not to you. The shouting doesn't stick. The hag calling turnips might as well be speaking Latin. The bells don't ring. They clang. You flinch every time, not from fear, but from dislocation, like the sound is hitting a part of your brain that used to belong to someone else. You hear your own breathing more than anything. Ragged, wet, too close. You try not to wheeze, but winter has its grip on your lungs. And every breath sounds like a question you don't want answered. You no longer trade. You no longer steal. You scavenge. And there's a difference. Stealing requires nerve. Scavenging requires absence. You go for what's already forgotten. A heel of bread dropped and trampled near the tannery. A cracked pot outside the fishmonger's. You chew bones with the marrow and suck scraps through the cracks in your teeth. You no longer know if the pain in your gums is rot or cold or hunger. You do not care. You used to have hiding places, little corners tucked behind shutters, inside walls, beneath stairwells. They're all gone now. Someone took them, or someone like you found them first. You sleep now in the dry parts of graveyards between stones too worn to read. No one disturbs you there. Not because it's holy, but because it stinks. The dead are quieter than the city and less judgmental. Your coat is no longer a coat. It's a suggestion. Holes outnumber fabric. The lining is gone. One sleeve ends at the elbow. You try to patch it once with burlap, but the burlap was too proud. It walked away in the night. You wrap yourself in whatever remains. Your knees are always cold. Always. You forget what warm knees feel like. You imagine it must be a sin. You cough blood now. Not much, just enough to stain. You hide it in your collar. You smear it in the dirt. You tell yourself it's nothing, that the cold air stings your throat, that you bit your tongue in your sleep. You know it's a lie, but you've told bigger ones to survive. One more won't break you. You talk to yourself sometimes. Not words, sounds, mutterings, pieces of songs you don't remember learning. You hum lullabies through cracked lips because silence is worse. You once caught yourself reciting names. Not your own, not your mother's, just names half-formed, invented, a litany of people who never existed. You try to stop. You couldn't. Your brain is filling the spaces your life left empty. You see fewer guards now. Not because they've gone, because you've learned to stop existing where they look. You become cloth, shadow, trash. You lean like a sack. You slump like a cripple. You perfect the expression of someone too pathetic to bother with. It works, mostly. Once a guard kicked you out of spite. Not rage. Not justice. Just boredom. You didn't move for 3 hours. You didn't cry. You didn't even bruise. You'd already bruised deeper. You forget days. You lose them. Wake in one place, sleep in another, and wonder where the middle went. The bells chime. You stop counting. Is it morning? Evening? Festival? You once tried to steal a turnip from shrine offering. The priest said nothing. He just stared at you until you left it behind. You dreamed about that turnip for 3 nights. It grinned at you. You see things now. Not visions. Not ghosts. Just movement. In the corners, in puddles, reflections. A child's hand under a cart. A pale shape in the fog. You blink and it's gone. You think maybe they're the parts of you that flaked off. Memories without homes. You greet them sometimes. They don't answer. Rude, but understandable. You find an old woman dying behind a brewery. Her breath smells like rot and vinegar. She doesn't speak. She just holds out her hand. You take it. You don't know why. She squeezes. Then she's gone. You close her eyes. You sit with her until the sky darkens. No one comes. You take nothing. Even the dead deserve dignity. Even now. Especially now. You think of the gallows. You've seen them so many times they're part of your dreams. Not the hanging, the waiting, the quiet before the drop. The breath the condemned takes, shallow, final, resigned. You feel like that breath. Suspended. Anticipating. You don't know if you'll fall or if the rope will snap, but you know the plank beneath your feet is thin. You try to remember love, not romance, not lust, just kindness, a hand, a smile, a voice that didn't ask for anything. You remember a dog licking your hand once. It might have been hunger. You took it anyway. You imagine her name was Sister. She died. You buried her. You think the memory is soft. You don't count coins. You don't have any. You count ribs, blisters, cracks in walls. You count steps between hiding places. You count how many bites you can take before the bread molds. You count the times you almost fall asleep standing. You hate the stars. They sparkle like mockery. You hate fire. It reminds you of warmth. You hate laughter unless it's yours. And even then, it sounds wrong. Too loud. Too sharp. Like it doesn't know when to stop. You remember once hearing that sin lives in silence. You think maybe it's not sin. Maybe it's memory. You carry so many. None of them yours. A boy screaming. A woman shouting thief with a knife in her hand. A priest whispering prayers for the dead and slipping coins from the poor box. A guard vomiting after his first hanging. You weren't part of any of them, but you carried them like teeth in a pouch. You whisper sometimes, "I was here," to walls, to doors, to the sky. Not to be remembered, just to hear it aloud. Proof you existed, that the silence isn't winning. Not yet. There is a rule, and it's the only one you still trust. The rope always remembers. It remembers weight, strain, sweat, and the sudden slack of a neck snapped mid-sentence. You didn't learn this in a chapel or from a mother or from a kindly baker who fed you half-moldy crusts and stories. You learned it from the scaffold, from the square, from the way the air thickens when judgment becomes spectacle. The rope remembers. The crowd forgets. They come for the screaming. They stay for the silence. And you, by some cruelty of fate or comedy of timing, have lived long enough to be standing too close to the gallows without yet being on them. You're not there to steal. Not today. Not after the beating you took last time, when a butcher's apprentice cracked a rib for catching your fingers in his coin pouch. Not after the night you spent beneath a cart, pressed against frozen dung, coughing blood and bile and prayer. You're there because the rope called, because the square fills with noise and heat and breath, and you can almost remember what it was like to be part of it. You don't blend anymore. You dissolve. You become the grime, the shadow, the bitter smell of men who haven't wept in years. You stand near the back, not too near. The guards don't like familiar faces at the front, especially yours. They're hanging 3 today, a pickpocket, a poacher, and a priest. Not your kind. The pickpocket was sloppy, took a purse from a man with 2 rings and 4 friends. The poacher sold venison to a knight's mistress. The priest whispered the wrong penance to the wrong widow and got accused of necromancy, or treason, or heresy, or all 3. You don't know. You don't care. They're all dead now, just waiting to admit it. The square is hungry. Always. It swells with people too tired to work and too restless to stay home. The air smells of sweat and old grease and anticipation. Children sit on barrels. Women press close to their nostrils. Men spit into the mud and count the moments. A boy climbs a fence. His father yanks him down with a curse and a backhand. A merchant bets 2 coins on which man cries first. He's wrong. The priest weeps before the rope even touches him. You don't flinch. You've seen worse. You've been worse. You don't know why you stay. Maybe because it reminds you of what you aren't, of what you almost were, of the boys who used to stand beside you in the crowd, cheering or vomiting or both. You think of Tooth, Roan, Finn, all dead or gone, or worse, respectable. You don't know which is heavier. You remember the first hanging you watched. You were 10, or maybe 12. The man begged. You thought it was pathetic. Now you know it was honest. The pickpocket twitches. The crowd gasps. The priest shits himself. The poacher goes quiet. His legs kick for a while, then stop. You count the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 7, 12. Time doesn't matter anymore, but counting keeps the bile down. You stare at the shoes. Always the shoes. They flap, hang, scuff the wood. You wonder if they'll be claimed. If someone will cut the laces and sell them in the alley behind St. Hilda's. You wonder if you've ever worn dead men's shoes. The answer is yes. You just hope none of them remember. Afterwards, the crowd disperses like fog, quickly, cowardly. No one wants to linger with death too long. It sticks. It stains. You remain. You always do. You watch the bodies sway. You listen to the creak. You pretend it's wind, not weight. You spit into the mud and walk away before the cart comes to cut them down. You don't want to see their faces up close. You don't want to know if you knew them. You find a crust near the cobbles. Someone dropped it in their hurry to be horrified. You eat it. You don't wipe it first. You haven't wiped anything in days. You return to your hole in the wall. Literally a hole, carved behind a butcher's shutter, hidden by mold and habit. You crawl in. You curl up. You count your ribs again. Fewer than before. You pull your knees to your chest and breathe through your teeth to quiet the cough. You feel the silence press against you, thick and oily and full of echo. You whisper the rule. The rope remembers, not as comfort, as reminder. That night you dream of shoes, hundreds of them, dangling, kicking, spinning. You don't see faces, just soles, laces, mud. You wake with sweat crusted on your lips and blood in your mouth. You bite your own finger to stop the scream. You succeed. You always do. You piss blood in the alley. Not much, just enough. You tell yourself it's the cold, or the rat bite on your thigh, or the meat you ate 2 nights ago that smelled of vinegar and old pewter. You know it's none of those. You lean against the wall and watch your breath fog like a soul refusing to leave. You count how long it takes to fade. 7 seconds, maybe 8. The rope would take less. You almost smile. You don't. You go back to the market. The shoes are still swinging behind your eyes. You never meant to work for someone again. Not after the last time. Not after the alley near Bread Street where you ended up with a broken wrist and nothing but fleas for payment. But when you haven't eaten in 3 days and your piss runs clear from lack of salt, even your rules start looking optional. You don't beg. You don't pray. But when a man with a fur collar and 3 fingers too many on one hand says he needs something retrieved, you nod before he finishes the word. You tell yourself, it's not employment. It's a favor, a transaction, a game. His name is Osric, or at least that's what he calls himself. You know it's false. Real names are heavy things and his face is too light. He wears the smell of candles and expensive ink, and his teeth are too straight for someone who spends his nights in taverns making offers to strangers who don't blink enough. He asks if you're clever. You shrug. He asks if you're quiet. You nod. He asks if you like dogs. You say no. He smiles. The job is simple, which means it's a lie. A ledger. That's it. A single book, bound in brown leather, kept in a merchant's counting room behind the old granary. No guards, no locks, no curses or booby traps. Just dust, shadows, and opportunity. He even draws you a map. Not well, but he draws it. You've had worse guidance from priests. You go at night. Not because it's safer, but because you have nowhere else to be. The streets are wet from snow melt and horse piss. Your boots are paper thin. Every step is an insult. You pass a man vomiting in his own beard, a woman slapping a child without looking at him, a dog chewing something that screams. You don't pause. The city doesn't want witnesses. The counting house is smaller than you imagined. The door opens with a whimper. The hall is silent, but not still. There's a breath to the place, a pulse. You listen to the creak of old timbers and the drip of a leak somewhere overhead. You smell ink, mold, and ambition. You slip inside like you were born here. Maybe you were. You find a room easily. Osric's map is vague, but your instincts fill in the blanks. You know how spaces think. You know how merchants hide shame. The lock is old, rusted, its size open with barely a protest. Inside, shelves, scrolls, a table stained with old wax. You find a ledger in the middle. Just as he said, brown leather, heavy, quiet. You turn to leave, and the dog is there. It doesn't bark, it doesn't growl. It stares, gray and lanky, ribs like knives, eyes like holes that forgot how to die. You freeze, not because of fear, because of disbelief. Osric didn't mention a dog, which means he didn't know, or didn't care. You move slowly. The dog moves slower. You reach in your coat, not for a weapon, for a crust of bread from yesterday's theft. You hold it out like a prayer. The dog doesn't sniff, it lunges. You fall backward, ledger clutched to your chest, teeth to your cloth. Not flesh. Yet you kick, you miss, you scream. Inside, the dog's breath is rot and old death. You throw the crust. It watches it fall. Then it watches you. You don't wait to see what it decides. You run, not with grace, with panic. You crash into shelves. You hear scrolls fall. You slam the door behind you, heartbeat in your throat, blood singing in your ears. The dog doesn't follow. You don't know why. Maybe it was never really there. Maybe it's still chewing the crust, savoring your cowardice. You stagger into the street, panting, coughing, tasting blood and bile. You have the ledger. You walk 5 blocks before you stop. You sit on a broken crate behind a bakery and open the book. It's not a ledger. It's names, dates, payments, symbols you don't recognize. Words in 3 languages, none of them friendly. You stare at the page with your name on it. Not your real name. The one they use, the one they whisper, scratch, in thick black ink. Next to it, a number and the word delivered. You close the book. You do not return to Osric. You burn the ledger in a gutter near the docks. It smells like dead skin and wax. It doesn't scream, but it seems like it wants to. You sleep in the rafters of an abandoned stable. The wind howls through the beams. You wake 3 times. Sure, you hear pause. The next day, Osric is gone. The tavern swears no one by that name drank there. The innkeeper says the description matches a man found floating in the river. You do not check. You do not care. You find a different alley, a new corner. You crouch in the dark and listen to the city breathe. You remember the dog. You remember the ledger. You remember that your name was written in ink before you ever picked up the job. You do not take work again for a long, long time. There are 3 kinds of fences in the city, and none of them were signs. The first kind smiles too much and asks too little. They give you half a coin for a golden brooch and say it's out of fashion. They give you a crust and a shrug for a copper ring and tell you they're doing you a favor. They always have wine on their breath and blood under their nails, though they never touch a blade. The second kind doesn't smile. They weigh everything with fingers that twitch like rats' tails. They know the market price of everything down to the prayer stitched in the hem. They give you what it's worth, less a tenth, and remind you it could have been worse. The third kind doesn't deal in things. They deal in knowledge, where to hide, where not to, who pays, who's looking, who thinks you're already dead. You've worked with all 3. None of them like you. Not because you're bad at what you do. You're not. You're quiet. You're forgettable. You're cheap. But there's something about your face, or your eyes, or maybe the way you never laugh at their jokes. Maybe it's how you never drink what they offer. Or maybe it's just the way you watch their hands, always like you're waiting for them to reach for the knife they don't know they'll need. Today you go to a 4th kind, a new one, a woman named Mara. She works out of the ruins of an old bathhouse, the one that collapsed when the bishop's cousin tried to run a brothel out of the steam rooms. The roof is mostly gone. The floor is mostly wet. There's moss where the ceiling used to be, and the rats walk without fear. You step over a dead cat on the way in. You don't look at its eyes. Mara doesn't rise when you enter. She doesn't even turn. She sits on a stool that used to be a column. Her legs are bare, covered in scars. Her hands are black with soot. She polishes a blade that looks too clean for this place. If you're here to confess, she says, you're late. The priest's under the floor, and he's not listening. You don't speak. You place the satchel on the stone beside her and step back. She opens it without asking. She lifts the necklace first. A string of pearls, one missing, the clasp twisted from her knife. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't smile. Next, the ring, gold scratched, warm from your skin. Then the pouch. Coins, not many, but old, fat, real. She holds one up to the light, sniffs it. Mutton grease, she says. You took it from a table, not a hand. You say nothing. She finally looks at you. You're careful, she says, or lazy. She tosses the pouch back. Either way, you're late. You don't ask what that means. She nods to a shadow behind you. You turn. Too slow, the blow catches your ribs. Not hard, just a message. A man steps forward, big, soft, the kind of soft that's been fed on other people's hunger. He smiles like a butcher. "You cost me coin," Morris says. "You brought me garbage last time. Broken chains, stolen prayer books, a bloodied comb. And now you want favors?" She leans forward. "No, you want forgiveness." You shake your head. You don't apologize. You've never known how. She stands. Her knees crack. She's taller than you expected. She moves like a cat that remembers it used to be a lion. She walks past, circles you once, twice. "You ever think about leaving?" she asks. "Not the city, the life." You don't answer. Of course you have. Everyone does. Right after their first taste of real meat. Right after the first time they sleep indoors. Then the city reminds them, you're not a man. You're a shadow. A disease, a mistake. She stops in front of you, hands you a coin. One old, silver. "Bring me something worthy," she says. "Not from a drunk. Not from a chapel. From someone whose name matters. Whose blood would stain a parchment." She leans closer. "Bring me something royal." You take the coin. You don't ask the price. You never do. Outside, the wind is colder. Or maybe it's just you. You tuck the coin into your boot. You don't believe in luck, but silver like that cuts deeper than a blade. You make your way toward the west quarter, where the merchants sleep with guards and the walls have ears and noses and knives. You haven't stolen from the rich in months. Not since the fire. Not since Roan didn't come back. But you remember the angles. You remember the timing. You remember the feeling in your gut that says, "This is too clean." You pass a mirror in a broken stall. You see your face. You don't recognize it. Hollow eyes. Blood on the collar. The scar that wasn't there a month ago. You breathe in, out. You tell yourself it's just another job. You lie. The house is big. Not noble, but close. A merchant who sells spices that don't smell like anything. A wife with a laugh like broken bells. A daughter who sings too late at night. You watch. You count steps. You learn the rhythm. You wait 3 nights. On the 4th, you move. The window gives easily. The hall is dark. You walk like a ghost. No creaks. No light. Just breath. Just silence. Just the dog barks. You freeze. You hear movement, feet, voices. You run. You don't look back. You hit the street with blood on your sleeve and a coin in your teeth. You don't remember biting it. You run to Mara's bathhouse. You don't knock. You toss the ring onto the stone. She catches it without flinching. She looks at you. "Whose is this?" You don't answer. She nods. She hands you a loaf. You eat it with your hands shaking. Later, in the dark, in the corner where no one looks, you turn the ring over and read the name inside. It's yours. Or it was. You don't ask how she got it. You never ask questions you don't want answered. There are nights when the city feels too loud. Not because of bells or barking or beggars crying to saints, but because of the silence in between. The kind of silence that listens, watches, judges. By now you've learned to sleep in pieces, never fully, never long. Always in a corner, a crack, a shadow where the rats pass you by, because you're not food. Not yet. You close your eyes and hear your name where it shouldn't be. Not the name your mother never said right, but the one the fences. Whisper, the one the guards write down with a sneer, the one carved into a door near Fish Hill with a cross and a warning. You don't know who wrote it. You don't know if it was meant for you, but you stop going near Fish Hill. You stay lower now, dirtier, less bold. You skip markets, avoid bakeries, don't touch anything that jingles. You become a ghost of yourself, or maybe the real version, the boy without a plan, the man without a face, the thief who knows the wall is getting closer and the alley is getting narrower, and every exit you thought you had is suddenly filled with smoke. One night, you wake to find Roan sitting beside you. He's dead. You saw him die. Or you think you did. Fire, screaming, the press of bodies. Then nothing, but now he's here, thin, smiling, picking at a splinter in his thumb. You don't speak. He does. He tells you it wasn't your fault. He says the fire was the price, not the punishment. He says the city is just a mouth, chewing names. You blink, and he's gone. You don't sleep again for 3 nights. On the 4th, you wake with something pressed into your hand. A letter, not sealed, not signed, just 3 words. They remember you. You burn it. You don't know who they are. You don't want to. You try to leave the city. You get as far as the south gate before a guard looks at you too long, and you remember you still limp when it rains. You turn around. You sleep in a crypt that smells of damp hope. You dream of dogs and fires and silver coins that bleed when you bite them. You wake with blood on your tongue. You try to sell a pair of boots to a man who sells secrets. He asks where you got them. You lie. He smiles. He buys them. You think it's over. That night, someone leaves 1 boot on your blanket. Just 1. You throw it in the river. You stop sleeping. You start coughing again. Deep. Wet. Like the old winters before you learned what mold does to lungs. You go to the apothecary behind the butcher's stall. You don't give your name. You trade a stolen spoon for a jar of something thick and black. It tastes like rot and numbness. You take it anyway. You start dreaming again. This time you dream of a trial. Not in a court. In a street. Your face on a wall. Your name on a nail. People spitting, throwing turnips, the same way they did when you were 12 and too slow. The judge is a mirror. You look and see every face you stole from, every purse you sliced, every old woman who blessed herself when you passed. They chant your name, not in anger, not in praise. In hunger, you wake screaming into your own sleeve. You move again to the tannery district where no one notices the smell of guilt. You start wearing gloves, not for warmth, for concealment. Your fingers shake when they touch coins. You stop looking people in the eyes. You only speak when spoken to, and even then you mumble. You see Tooth in the market, or someone who walks like him. He doesn't see you, or he pretends not to. You turn your back. You don't want to remember his laugh. You don't want to remember the time he pulled you out of a river with your lungs full of God and sewage. You don't want to owe anyone. That night you cut off your hair. Not because it helps, because it changes something. You find work that isn't thieving, just for a day. Carrying wood, moving crates. Your back screams. Your arms go soft. You last 6 hours. You take your pay in bread and salt and a look of pity from the man who pays you. You don't go back. You steal again, just to feel alive, just to feel something. A handkerchief from a noble, a bottle of ink from a clerk, a ring from a man who beats his wife and deserves worse. You don't fence them. You bury them, like trophies, like apologies, like proof that you still exist. You start seeing smoke where there isn't any, curling from shutters, rising from drains, whispering from the mouths of old men who mumble when they pray. You see fire in puddles, ash on your sleeves. You blink, it's gone. You stop trusting your eyes. You stop trusting your hands. You stop trusting your memory. One night you sit on a roof and stare at the moon until it blurs. You wonder how long you can live like this. You wonder if you're already dead. Then you hear a whisper, not in your head, behind you, a real voice. Not angry, not mocking, just curious, still running. You don't turn. You don't need to. You know the voice. You smile. Then you jump, not off the roof, into the next alley, into the next shadow, into the next part of the city that hasn't remembered you yet. Because if the city has a mouth, and if it chews names, then you'll be the stone it breaks its teeth on. There is a thing worse than being hunted, and that is being remembered. Not in songs, not in prayers, but in the creases of other men's palms when they count their coins and notice one is missing. You had once believed that memory was a fragile thing, a thread easily broken in the rot and chaos of city life. But memory, it turns out, is a blade, and you left too many fingers wrapped around its hilt. Now they tighten. Now they pull. You first hear his name at the tannery, where you sometimes loiter just to feel the fire of the vats against your skin and pretend that heat alone can cauterize what you become. A boy mutters it while bartering for salted hides. Not a shout, not even a sentence, just a syllable wrapped in vinegar breath and fear. You freeze, not because you know the name, but because it knows you. You walk away without finishing your meal. You do not eat for 2 days. You learn that his name is not just spoken in one quarter. It's painted, scratched into alley walls, burned into the wood of a water trough near the western gate. You see it in the eyes of beggars who have no teeth left but still whistle it under their tongues. The name is not famous. It is not noble. But it is yours, or rather, it is the echo of the name you once gave a man who trusted you not to run. And run you did. Back then, you believed you were faster than consequence. You had a blade, a body still young enough to climb walls, lungs not yet soaked in soot. You had stolen something, not coin, not silver, but a debt, one you never paid. You disappeared. You thought it would stay buried, but cities are good at digging up the past, especially when it owes. The man's name is Cyril. You don't know if that was his name then. Maybe he had a different one. Maybe he gave it to the rats. What you remember is the way he walked, slow, like someone who already knew where the doors would be locked. He was not a fence. He was not a client. He was something else. He lent favors the way others lent daggers, carefully, only once, and never without a price. You took his favor once, a cloak, a bolt hole under a brothel, a bag with 6 loaves of rye and a promise that the guards would be looking elsewhere until dawn. You were 16, desperate. You promised to return. You even meant it, but the city got in the way. Or you did. Now he's back. You hear he's got boys working for him. Not a gang. Not really. Just lost ones. Runts. Broken ones who can smile and lie and slip into courtyards without footprints. You hear they don't last long. Some say he sells them. Others say they vanish. One old man claims he saw one of the boys kneeling by the river, carving names into the mud with a nail. You don't want to know what that means. You try to leave again. Not the city, just the skin you're in. You cut your hair shorter. You wrap your arms in cloth. You sleep in the marshes 3 nights straight, with frogs croaking lullabies and your teeth chattering in rhythm. On the 4th night, you return to the streets and learn that Cyril is asking questions. Not loudly, just in the way that makes silence grow. You start seeing him. Not clearly, never clearly, but you feel him in the way the baker glances twice before turning. In the way the guard no longer ignore you but do not chase. In the way a silver coin appears in a bowl you left empty, with a note that reads, "You still owe." You burn the note. You keep the coin. One night you try to steal again. Not because you want to, because you need to know if you still can. You choose an easy mark, a drunk soldier, barely upright, his pouch begging for mercy. You wait. You move. You breathe the old rhythm. You reach. And then you freeze. Because the pouch is tied with a knot you know, the same kind Cyril used, not a slip knot, a hunter's knot. You learned it once when you were too young to understand that ropes go both ways. They can bind prey, but they can also drag you back. You let the pouch go. You walk away. That night you find a dead cat with no eyes outside your door. The message is clear. Cyril doesn't want payment. He wants presence. You begin to change your routes again. You walk through garbage heaps just to mask your scent. You rub vinegar on your clothes so dogs won't follow. You keep coins in your mouth because if they hear you choking, maybe they won't check your hands. You speak to no one. You start watching children, not out of kindness, out of fear. You watch their posture, their hands. You look for signs, the way they move, the way they hold still. You wonder which ones are his. You wonder if they're watching you now. You wonder if you've already been marked. You steal a cloak. Not a good one. Just thick enough, you dye it with ash and prayer. You change your gait. You start limping on the other foot. You rub dirt into your teeth and start chewing licorice root just to change your breath. You tell yourself it's enough. That if you become small enough, dirty enough, forgotten enough, maybe he'll stop remembering. But he doesn't. You find a message carved into a table at the inn where you never use your name. 3 days. You don't wait. You run. You don't go to the gates. That would be obvious. You go down into the old catacombs beneath the charnel house, into the bones, into the rot. You crawl through tunnels you barely fit in. You drink from stagnant pools. You sleep on skulls. You laugh once and scare yourself with the sound. You stay for 2 days. You emerge on the third. The city has not changed, but you have. You are thinner, quieter. Your eyes do not blink as much. You return to Mara. You bring her nothing. She looks at you. She sees everything. You saw him, she says. You nod. She lights a candle, places it on the stone between you. If he comes, she says, run again. You ask why. She says nothing. You ask again. She looks at the flame. Because if you stay, she whispers, he'll forgive you. You laugh. Then you cry. Because you know what forgiveness costs. And you're not sure you can afford it. You don't notice the limp until it's permanent. Not the bruise that never fades. Not the way your fingers have started to curl when you sleep, as if still clutching something long gone. You're older now. Not old, not yet. But in your world, old starts early, around 20. That's when the joints ache in the rain, the lungs cough in the morning, and the nights become longer than the days, even in midsummer. You don't run like you used to. You don't hide like you used to. You've become too careful, too slow, and everyone knows what that means. The end doesn't come with a gallows. It comes with silence. You've spent your life beneath the notice of the world, and now even your enemies forget to look over their shoulder for you. That should be a good thing. It isn't. You don't belong to a city anymore. You've drifted from London to Norwich, from Norwich to York, from York to Bruges once. But that was a mistake. The language, the locks, the faces, all wrong. You barely escaped with a cracked rib and a broken tooth, and neither healed straight. Now, you live on the fringe of a village that doesn't remember your name. They think you were a soldier once. You let them believe that. You even found a crutch and a scar to sell the illusion. You mend nets for the fishers, patch boots for passing pilgrims, and pretend the cough in your chest isn't rot. Every few months, someone recognizes your eyes. Not your face, just the eyes. They squint and say, you remind me of, and you say, I don't, and that ends it. But you know they go home and wonder. There's a woman, of course there is, not young, not old, not yours, but she brings you bread when it's raining and herbs when your leg swells. You don't ask why. You don't ask anything. You're afraid of her answers. Once, she finds the knife under your cot. She doesn't say a word, just hands it back to you the next morning cleaned. You don't sleep that night. You don't trust kindness. Not anymore. Kindness is the bait in every trap you've ever known. But she keeps coming back. So you build a second chair. You clean your hands before supper. You find yourself hoping the winter won't be too hard this year. One evening, a boy steals your pouch. Not much in it. A few bent coins, a carved bone button, the stub of a candle. He's fast, but not fast enough. You catch him behind the smithy, panting, ready to run again. He's skinny, wide-eyed, 10 at most, and you see yourself in his cracked fingernails. You take back the pouch. You hand him the button. He stares like it's magic. He comes back the next week, then again. You teach him how to mend leather, how to move without noise, how to lie like it's breathing. You don't call it training, you call it surviving. One night, he asks if you were ever someone. You say no. He believes you. That's the first time you feel ashamed. The woman dies in spring. Not sick, not stabbed, just gone. A cough that didn't get better. You bury her behind the chapel wall where the earth is soft and the grass doesn't grow. You don't cry. You just sit beside the grave until your joints lock and your fingers start to tremble. That night, you carve her name into a stone with your old knife. You don't know if you spell it right. It doesn't matter. No one will check. The boy brings flowers. Wild, crushed, half-dead flowers, but you say, nothing. You think about stealing something worth burying with her. A ring, a silver spoon, something shiny. But you don't. You've stopped stealing. You're not sure when or why. Summer comes, and your breath gets worse. Each morning, it feels like someone filled your chest with smoke and glass. The boy goes into town more often now. Brings back news, bread, once even a fish. You tell him stories. Not real ones. Not yours. Just old lies turned into parables. You warn him not to get clever. Not to get noticed. Not to get caught. He listens, which is dangerous. He's getting better. Too good. You see it in the way he watches people's hands. Not their faces. In the way he memorizes footsteps. In a way he never asks what happened to your fingers, your ribs, your limp. One day he'll vanish, just like you did. You don't know whether to feel proud or afraid. Autumn comes, cold, wet, honest. Your hands shake now. Not from fear, just age. You try to sew a boot and prick your thumbs 6 times. The boy takes the needle, doesn't say a word. Just finishes the job while you pretend not to watch. You catch yourself wondering what your name was before all this. You remember a time before the knife, before the lashes, before the blood. You were someone. Maybe the wind starts a howl at night. The rats move closer to the hearth. You leave the door unlocked, just in case the boy forgets his key. Just in case someone worse finds you first. You stop counting the years. You start counting the breaths between coughs. One morning you don't wake up, or maybe you do, and it just doesn't feel different. The boy finds you slumped in the chair, eyes half open, mouth half shut. He calls her name. Not your real one. Just the one he gave you, Old Scratch. You like it. He doesn't cry. He just sits with you until the sun is all the way up. Then he takes the knife from your belt, folds your hands over your chest, and leaves. He doesn't take your coins. He takes the button and the boots. He leaves the pouch. A week later, someone else lives in your hut. A tanner's cousin, maybe. The grave behind the chapel gets overgrown. The boy is gone. The market whispers of a new shadow. Someone quiet, fast, clever. No name. Just a rumor. And the story ends like all the others. Not with glory, not with gold, but with a thief no one remembers in a world that never noticed he was there to begin with. And that's the truth. You didn't make history. You passed through it like a whisper in mud. You weren't loved. You weren't feared. But for a moment, in a gutter, in the dark, in the silence between 2 footsteps, you were free. And that was enough.